Start small and we can all build it up together.
Welcome to London, where we arrived last night via Amsterdam and then the Channel Tunnel, by train of course. Not much to say about that journey. We mostly sat on our asses in fairly comfortable seats and edited the Berlin episode, which you hopefully will have watched by now. If you haven't, then please check it out after this one. London is a city of, give or take, 9 million inhabitants, so the third biggest city in Europe. And unlike my expectations, it hasn't yet turned into this kind of Mad Max-esque wasteland, but yet it kind of feels that most people here are quite ready to come back into the fold. The UK, of course, gave us the Industrial Revolution, which is essentially why we're now in this mess. But they also gave us the steam locomotive, which is how we got all these beautiful high-speed trains that we're spending the next 9 or 10 weeks on. The United Kingdom games market is either the biggest or the second biggest in Europe, and the UK is home to a crazy number of really well-established, really unique and creative games companies.
We start off this week with a two-parts episode at Pocket Gamer Connects. Pocket Gamer Connects is the first big event of the year for the European games industry. The Games Force Club partnered up with this conference to enable the participants to reduce their ecological footprint. And in this episode, we will go and talk to the organizers and participants of the conference, as well as the founder of Miniclip, Rob Small. So let's go and check out the conference.
I'm Chris James. I'm the CEO of Still Media, which runs Pocket Gamer and Pocket Gamer Connects, which is where we are here in London. We're basically media and events for the mobile games and progressively a bit more of the games industry. In terms of obstacles, obviously the whole world is facing a kind of a crunch at the moment. There will be layoffs, so that's the thing. The people will have a bit less disposable income. So I think generally the games industry, like every industry, is going to be affected by that. Revenues might be a little bit tighter, margins will be a bit tighter. Costs will go up a little bit because everybody needs more money at the moment. And the games industry has proven, it's had 25-year winning streak basically until last year of going up in value every year. And we've so good at dealing with adversity. So many creative people who have find ways around it. And I think games are not like a holiday or a car. They're, people can get the little rewards, certainly mobile, or even a $50 PC or console game, it's not a massive outlay. So during recessions, typically games doesn't really suffer. The whole world plays games now. There's over 3 billion players and rising if you count various devices. So, and some markets are very buoyant at the moment. The Middle East is very buoyant. Southeast Asia is growing fast. Latin America. Not everywhere in the world is struggling quite the same way financially as we may be in the West at the moment.
How can games be part of it to solve this problems which are out there, because we have the power.
With great power comes great responsibility,
exactly,
right? We all know that.
Yeah.
I think we have a responsibility, and I think we have opportunities to do that. I think people do care, and I think people are doing things. Is it fast enough? It's probably not, but then we're probably faster than our politicians, right? The politicians are somewhere behind. Being environmentally friendly, being carbon neutral, supporting this and other issues like that will become increasingly important. I think consumers will seek out and want to support companies that support this. I think it's not a cool thing to do. I think people will actually want to vote with their kind of wallets ultimately to do that. There's a lot more we can do, definitely. There's a lot more events like us. We are, by nature, we travel a lot. I travel all around the world. And am I thinking enough about the impact of that? Probably not. So I think there's a long way to go, and we can obviously hopefully help a bit to kind of continue the education. I think, this is the start of not the start, but this is an ongoing thing. It's not going to be solved by anything overnight.
Well, my name is Kate Edwards, and I'm a geographer who's been doing culturalization work in the game industry for almost 30 years. And so I help a lot of companies make sure their content will be compatible in different markets around the world. And not necessarily from a language standpoint, which is localization, but from kind of an everything standpoint, everything about the game. But I've also spent time, I was the executive director of the International Game Developers Association and also the executive director of the Global Game Jam. One of the bigger challenges is the cultural challenge. So essentially, how does our medium gain acceptance? And I think like most mediums, that's going to be a demographic change. So we're just going to have to wait for it to happen. So as people who become politicians are people who grew up with video games. We're going to see policies relax and be more accepting about what games are and how games can be included in the larger landscape and conversations about culture. How do we as an industry start proving that we are part of the entire narrative around being a responsible industry? I mean, we're already seeing many industries being challenged on that, like energy industries, medical industries, things like that, which should be challenged. And I think the game industry, to a certain degree, has been challenged. Are we gambling? Are we encouraging addictive behaviors, things like that? But I think more from the broader perspective, like what role do we play not only as a cultural force in games, but what do we contribute to society in terms of our carbon footprint and all the other issues that we are bringing to the table? Because we are this massive industry, and which I love, and it's a great thing to be a part of. But at the same time, this massive industry likes to look at itself and says, oh, we're just kind of these kids starting up. It's like, we're not anymore. We've been around for decades, and we're the largest form of entertainment on earth. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the company needs to embrace its values, to understand what exactly do we stand for, what do we want to stand for. And I've seen a lot of companies now, in the wake of some of the geopolitical events like Ukraine and other things happening, they are being challenged with the reality that they need to stand for something. Yeah. They need to understand that the world is watching them. Social media is a vicious beast. It can be incredibly supportive, but also incredibly, not supportive. Yeah. And a lot of companies are very conscious of that. And so they don't want to disappoint their communities and their fans, but they need to be better at basically being proactive in understanding how do we set forth our values in a way that makes sense, and values that can be timeless. For example, in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement that happened about 3 years ago, we saw a lot of companies suddenly step up and issue inclusivity statements, diversity statements, and other things, all of which is great. But it's like, why did you wait for that? Yeah. You could have done this at any time in the last many decades. Why did you have to wait for that social moment to decide that now I guess we need to do something now? You don't have to wait for the tide to come. You can sit down and think very consciously about who you want to be as a company and the kind of content you want to create, and be very mindful of it. Take a hard look at how do we make our games, how do we send people around the world, how do we communicate with each other, and take a very systematic view of everything that you're doing and step back and say, do we really need to do this? Do we really need to do that? And just take the time to do it. And unfortunately, so many companies we're so busy making our games. But it's like, if you want to be around and have longevity of a company, you have to do this at some point. And the reality is that you either get forced to do it by some kind of cultural or geopolitical event, or you do it proactively and you have more control over it. For example, the work that I do it because we want to respect the people who play our games, because they come from different cultures. That argument, though, oftentimes when it comes down to making a change, that doesn't sell the argument. What sells it is that if you do this, the game will be more acceptable in that market or that region, therefore you'll make more money. We want to make sure that all the practices that we're doing, we're maximizing the benefit of our finances. So if we're going to travel, do we really need to travel? Do we really need to make the effort to do that? Or can we take care of this through Zoom calls or whatever, and find alternatives? And so I think it's that mindfulness about it, which I'm sure any CFO would be like, yes, absolutely, because that's what the CFO wants. The challenge is that we're dealing with different cultural regions, so to speak, where they live in a different worldview. And so, for example, the response that Brazil has had to some of the accusations about clearing the rainforest, but their response to some degree has been well, what about our manifest destiny to use the resources of our country in the same way the United States did and the UK did and all these other countries did when they had their chance before climate change was an issue. Yeah. But now that it's an issue, you're saying we can't take advantage of that. And so they see that kind of hypocrisy. Yeah. And so in China, the same way. I mean, China obviously has their own plan on how they want to kind of push their hegemony out to the world and maximize their influence. But that is also at odds with the reality of climate change and the impact it's going to have. So to me, that's going to be the biggest problem. Games are one of the most influential cultural mediums today. And so I think games can play a gigantic role in influencing public opinion on this. I mean, obviously we need to have good games that do it, and I think do it in a good allegorical way that does not necessarily putting it in your face really blatantly, but influencing through narrative, because ultimately that's what stories do. They influence thought, they influence perception of the way things are, and I think games are perfectly positioned for that, much more than film or any other medium, in my opinion.
I'm the COO and co-founder of the Sandbox, as well as the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance. I'm an avid gamer, serial entrepreneur, and I've been a serial entrepreneur for, 16 years already, a bit more. Spent 10 years in the mobile game industry and 4 years in the blockchain game industry as one of the pioneers in the space. Always been excited about empowering people to bring to life their ideas, let them create what they want, and hopefully make a living from the content they create. I think one of the challenges that so far our industry hasn't really been able to solve is the content discovery and the access to distribution. We know video games are entertainment product, but they're also business product, and it's sometimes hard to balance between creativity, fun, and generating the revenue and finding the right CPI versus LTV as the traditional balance that helps you create games that are sustainable, can keep living, and you can make a business of. And that has led the industry in general towards less and less content diversity, because there's been more iteration, data-driven iteration toward gameplay that works and where users are ready to spend in the free-to-play industry, which progressively makes games more and more look alike, or being the same core game or same meta game with a slight different core, or vice versa. One thing that the blockchain and the Web3 industry has tried to solve is also how do you shift the value chain again, so that the one that benefit the most from their time and their effort are the creators themselves, and not necessarily the platform or the games that live on the content made by the users, and hence capture that value instead of redistributing it fairly toward the users. Impact of generative AI into the industry. I see a lot of opportunity about it from what the panelists have been discussing around how much faster we can brainstorm, ideate, go to market, have a more refined content pitch, game pitch, feature description, and conversion rate by having greater marketing assets that fit toward the right audience. But at the same time, we are seeing that it could be destructive of certain categories of jobs, more specifically artist jobs, and that's been raising a concern already within the industry. Whereas it's been helpful to other jobs like developers code faster and become 40% more proficient as they develop the game. So as Sandbox, we're this decentralized gaming virtual world. We provide the tools for anyone to become a creator just by drag and dropping. So there is no need to learn any programming language. It's all no code. And we're positioning ourselves as a platform that is adding value toward an overall ecosystem, Web3 ecosystem, where you can come and play and interact with your NFTs, your digital asset, even if they were not made with Sandbox. We allow people to get more closely connected in community space or virtual neighborhoods on the map. And we empower a creator to earn back 95% of the revenue, of the values they create in the form of revenue from the sales of their NFTs and other experiences. The action you do in-game can potentially impact in the physical world again. So the more you play, the more support towards certain causes or charities around.
So it's also getting very political,
more social and environmental causes first. Social impact, education, reforestation, regreening, decarbonization, supporting women in tech or women in gaming, women in Web3 are some of the causes that we've been supporting. But is that enough? In general, I think we can do better always as an industry to try to make, again, an impact in the real world. And I like the fact that you can have fun, you can consume entertainment, and somehow still maybe give back as a game developer, as a studio, so that your users also are involved into an action that, for example, could be regreening a forest in certain region of the world, etc. We've done that with WeForest, where we gave 1% of the proceeds of land sale in Sandbox. I think we replanted 160,000 trees in Amazonia, Madagascar, and other countries and regions of the world. Through letting creators push those projects, the message becomes progressively, hopefully, more global, more regional, more impactful, more meaningful. And I think the metaverse can be a driving force for solving and addressing and educating and raising awareness about some of those challenges.
So hi, I'm Maor Sadra. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Incrmntal. Incrmntal is a SaaS platform that allows companies to measure what is the actual value of their marketing activities without needing user-level data or trying to penetrate into users' privacy. A month ago, I moved to Israel, so unfortunately, the only way I could get here was flights. I used to live in Berlin up to a month ago. That would have made life easier. We're a company that was born during the pandemic, so working remotely and not needing to commute 2 hours every direction to the office is probably part of that contribution. Actually, even before this, I was CEO for a bigger company where, for me, like work from home was why not? Why not trust people? And I think reducing commuting in general is a big part of that. And as a company, again, we're a measurement solution that doesn't require user-level data. When you don't require user-level data, you need substantial less computing resources.
Okay.
So like our Amazon, our AWS bill is a 1,000th of what usual tracking and attribution solutions would cost. And less computing, basically less impact on the environment. It's relatively natural in our sense of thinking. I don't think we are specifically dedicating thought to it. It's just, I would say for us, it's common sense at this point. I think that any company where it's just not their common sense is doing something wrong, or like very much old-fashioned, let's call it like that.
Yeah.
For sure, like we see what's happening in the economic side across the world. It's weird because I spoke with an analyst recently who says, from a consumer behavior, nothing's changed. It's investor-investees, so it's companies who are essentially driven by fear. Should we spend more? Should we hire more? Should we not trim the fat? And when we say trimming the fat, we mean laying off 25% of the people. We see this across the board. On the other hand, I think a lot of companies like understand that this is a fear factor and not real.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect to companies who are just acting consciously and responsibly as management, as board, as founders.
Yeah.
And not growing the cost base in order to later on lay off the cost base. So fortunately, we're in a position where companies could use our technology to save or to increase efficiency or to scale. So we have companies who use our product who actually did a lot of cuts, but our platform allows them to do the right cuts. Means let's cut the ad spend that is actually redundant, it is not adding value, and let's focus our ad spend where it does. So we are very fortunate in our position, I would say.
Yeah, my name's Hickey, and I'm the CMO at Sybo. We're in a very mature industry. Everyone has the same tool set, whether it's in game development or marketing. And I think the opportunity in the future is to build brands that start on mobile and connect with people, tell stories, and bring people along. Sybo's the most downloaded game in the world 10 years after it launched. So it already has that fan base and the virality, and our job is to protect that at all costs and to feed that community with content and experiences that they enjoy. I think it's just a cost of acquisition plus privacy restrictions. So everyone got so comfortable in these mathematical models of how to buy users and monetize them, and that's gone away for everybody. So it's a very even playing field, which you can actually look as a big challenge, or in our part, in a lot of other companies, we look at as a huge opportunity to figure out new and better ways to acquire users and then build a community where they become advocates for the game and the brand.
How can the games industry be one part of the solution for the big problem which we have?
Listen, the games industry has an unbelievable audience daily, right? But you know, a lot of games that people play 2 or 3 sessions a day and play 60 minutes a day. That's more time than your favorite TV show, right?
Yeah.
And so with this opportunity in the audience, there's a lot of initiatives. You know, whether it's a revenue share, it's company initiatives, it's partnering with different organizations to make a change. And there's so many good organizations out there. And it's really, if you look at some of the revenues of mobile games in the industry, you know, just a tiny fraction can make a massive difference, right?
Yes.
And I think that inspires. Mobile's always first. Mobile's the first to develop a lot of technologies, a lot of ways of interacting with content and interacting with audiences. Why can't we be the first and the leader in changing the world for the better through different green initiatives and I think the power of the giant mobile audience and the fact that, you know, mobile is with you every single day, everywhere you go. I think there's opportunities far and wide to take advantage of that.
So my name is Rob Small. I am the co-founder and president of mobile games company Miniclip. I founded the company 22 years ago now. And over those 22 years, Miniclip's been 2 businesses, a web games company and a mobile games company. We are probably most well known for games like 8-Ball Pool, which is our biggest franchise. We've been very active in the M&A space, recently acquiring Sybo, makers of Subway Surfers. We've got 70 million daily active users, 400 million monthly active users, and we generated about 4 billion downloads of our mobile games to date. Today, there are more mobile gamers and more mobile handsets in the world than ever before. So for a company whose mission is to unleash the gamer in everyone, for us, we see that as being a fantastic opportunity to keep growing our audience and fulfilling our mission. The power and I think the performance of those devices has been improving dramatically. Even in emerging markets now, we're seeing Android devices that can perform, you know, much faster than we've seen in years gone by. So that's really fueling this transition we're seeing of AAA games coming from console and PC into the mobile space, and you've seen the success of games like PUBG and Fortnite and Call of Duty, all of that really being facilitated, I think, by better technology. And then lastly, for a games company who is very much focused on acquisitions, I think the correction that we've seen in the market, valuations in the public markets coming off a little bit, means that people are a little bit more realistic now about market valuations, and so for a company like Miniclip, that's clearly advantageous. Of course, I think we're all feeling the macro headwinds. Consumers are feeling like they've got less money in their pockets, and I think, you know, as a developer, we've got to work that much harder now to convince them to spend money in our games. I think other obstacles are the challenges in the ads market. There's definitely been a pullback in ad spend. I think we've seen overall across the market about a 20% pullback now. So it does mean that if you're monetizing your games exclusively through advertising, that's a much harder thing to do. And we're seeing now a pivot, I think, of hyper-casual games companies moving into the casual and mid-core space because they just can no longer operate in hyper-casual. And I think the third challenge would be the regulatory environment. We're seeing somewhat overdue, I suspect, you know, more regulation on mobile games developers. We need to be, you know, more cautious about how we're using consumer data, and it forces us as an industry now to, I think outside of the box, try new ways to attract users and grow audiences in our games. I think not just the games industry, but I think every one of us has a part to play in this, and we've done a pretty poor job of being custodians of the planet over the last 40 years. And clearly, as an industry that can speak to over 3 billion people, we have a platform there that we can use to help to better educate you know, the world's population about climate change and what we can all do, I think, to address that. We've also been taking steps within our business. So we have just completed a new studio that we've built in Lisbon. It is one of the most environmentally efficient buildings that's been built in the whole of Portugal. And it has 2 accreditations, one for the wellness of our employees and one for the environmental efficiency that the building has. Much like other companies, we will do stuff like recycling and things like that, but that's really not touching the sides. We do encourage our staff to take 1 day's paid holiday a year to volunteer, to do projects, charitable projects voluntary projects, and so we have had teams that have gone out and planted saplings in forests and things like that. So there's a way that we can actually get our hands dirty and make a difference there. I think one of the benefits of COVID has been that we have reduced our business travel probably by 98%. We're definitely in a talent war at the moment, and I think our employees care deeply about the environment, and they expect Miniclip's business to reflect that care, I think, in the way that it addresses topics like climate change. So I think it's really good for businesses to embrace this, because it is something that employees care about, and actually also your players care about too. How do you avoid preaching? Right?
Yeah.
How do you not patronize? How do you recognize that there is a segment of your audience that doesn't actually want you to do that? They come to games as a form of escapism, to escape from some of the horrors of the real world.
Yeah.
And so you need to make sure that you also give them that opportunity in your game. So I think it's a very fine balance. Players expect the businesses that create products that entertain them, I think, to share the same values that they do. And our audience is 70 million people every day playing Miniclip games. There is a huge chunk of that audience that will care deeply about the climate crisis and want to believe that the companies whose products they use are doing something about it. And so I think it is good for business. I mean, I think the Sybo guys have done it best in Subway Surfers. The challenge that we have at Miniclip is that our core portfolio of games are generally sports games that are slightly more kind of utility type products, and therefore we're quite limited about how we can leverage a game like Pool, for example, to push those kinds of themes. I think if you've got adventure games that are a bit 3D and a bit more exploratory, then you can embrace those things more visually in the game. We're slightly limited, I think, with games like Able Pool around how we can do that. We have experimented in the past in collaborating with charitable causes, but we've had mixed results from the audience around their willingness to support that. And so we've tended to prefer as a business to try to do our bit from a corporate level rather than trying to leverage the game specifically to drive too much visibility of that, because I think it's a very fine line that we walk, and we do not want to patronize our audience and tell them things that they already know. And I think, you know, one's got to be careful about how you approach that. And I think the worst thing to do is just stick a plaster on there that says climate change and think that's enough. One of the advantages that we have is, as an industry, we have tons of amazingly creative people that can come up with fantastic ideas. So I wouldn't bet against the games industry in finding some pretty cool solutions to this. I don't have the solution right now, but I definitely would back the industry and the creative talents that we've got, I think, in wrapping their heads around this problem and trying to find a way to leverage what we've got at our disposal for the benefit of the planet. But it's a hard nut to crack, for sure.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Stop doing game merchandise, because game merchandise ends up in landfill, and landfill means that there are parts of Africa especially where 25% of their regional land is taken up with waste. Please stop this practice, it's ridiculous.
Hey, this is something what the games industry needs to hear.
No, I think we covered it.